New Orleans Saints second-year quarterback Jake Haener definitely has the lead when it comes to the team's quarterback 2 battle, but Spencer Rattler cannot be ruled out. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the show's so nice, I can't help but do it twice. I seriously was just sitting around going, you know what? I want to do another episode. So here I am. We're doing another episode. On today's show, we're going to take a look at the defensive line battles going on and why they're going to be massively unpredictable heading into training camp. But we'll try to figure out who might be able to come out on top. I'll tell you why wide receiver Cedric Wilson, the veteran addition this offseason, already feels like a lock for this New Orleans Saints team in 2024. And to kick us off, what separates Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler in the QB2 battle and why it's going to be the best battle of camp. We got all that and more coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer here on the show and for making us your first listen here on Locked On Saints, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jake Haener, right now, New Orleans Saints second-year quarterback, absolutely has the lead when it comes to the competition for who will be the backup to Derek Carr in 2024. But ruling Spencer Rattler out or believing that he is down for the count is just kind of premature. Let's break down where this battle stands, why it's important, and how the battle can continue or will continue going into training camp. So where things stand right now. By the way, real quick, before we get into that, I want to say happy birthday to Jerry, our moderator over on the Locked On Saints YouTube page. Just real quick, happy birthday, buddy. Appreciate you and everything that you do. So Jake Haener right now feels like he's got the clear lead in this battle. And I'm looking at this from a statistical purpose, right? I'm not looking at it because I like one more than the other. Training camp preseason, like that's really where these guys are going to start to separate. But if we want to look at where they are right now, it's definitely Jake Haener in the lead. 16 of 22 and a touchdown over the course of OTAs. During OTAs, Spencer Rattler was 10 of 20. That's only 50%, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. Jake Haener was actually the only quarterback to not throw an interception during OTAs. Then they got to minicamp and things already started to narrow a little bit. Jake Haener got more passing attempts and thereby more completions, but Rattler, based on the amount of passes that he attempted, was more efficient. Jake Haener, 19 completions on 27 passes, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Spencer Rattler, 16 completions on just 21 attempts, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Narrows the gap a little bit. So you could see that Spencer Rattler was getting a lot more comfortable over the course of minicamp, got more comfortable over the course of OTAs as well. I did some superlatives at the end of OTAs. I talked about Derek Carr looking like the most comfortable, Jake Haener being the most impressive, and Spencer Rattler being the most improved. And Spencer Rattler continues his improvement as he settles in. Now, just for reference sake, by the way, Derek Carr over the course of both OTAs and training camp threw 5 touchdowns to 1 interception and completed 75% of passes. So he was the best quarterback out of the 4 quarterbacks, with Nathan Peterman included, that threw passes for the New Orleans Saints during minicamps and OTA. So there's no doubt where Derek Carr sits, but the person sitting behind him, lots of car puns possible in all of that, but I'm just going to pass those up like I'm passing a car on the freeway. All right, I'm sorry. I had to do one. I had to get one out of the way. Anyway, when you look at all this, right now, this is why I say Jake Haener is in the lead. Now, what you'll notice is that Jake Haener started off working with the second team all through OTAs and then early on in minicamp, and then eventually it flipped to where Spencer Rattler started taking the second team reps. But it wasn't so clear that Spencer Rattler actually took over as the second quarterback in line. Yes, he started getting second team reps, but for instance, when Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints offense marched down the field in an end-of-game simulation with a running clock at 1:15, the next quarterback to get that situational rep was not Spencer Rattler. It was Jake Haener. So in some situations, he was working with the second team. But in other situations, Jake Haener was given those second team reps. Spencer Rattler did not and was not given an opportunity at all to do that end-of-game simulated drive. And part of that is, hey, how much time do they have left? How much time did the first drill take to actually wrap up? All those other things. It might not have been a conscious decision to not give all three of those quarterbacks that opportunity. It might have just come down to how long they were allowed to practice for. But with all that being said, they prioritized Jake Haener getting those situational reps over Spencer Rattler, even though Spencer Rattler was prioritized in terms of eventually getting those second team drill reps and second team 7-on-7 reps over the course of time. And it's also worth mentioning, too, that as the Saints got deeper and deeper into minicamp, the rules of first team, second team, third team kind of changed, right? Marshawn Lattimore was taking second team reps to get work against new wide receivers. A.T. Perry was getting first team reps, second team reps, third team reps, while Mason Tipton was moving into, undrafted free agent, was moving into first team reps so he could work against some first team corners. So you try to mix and match a little bit in terms of the weapons, the quarterback, who's throwing to them, who they're lining up across, who's trying to stop them from catching passes, who's rushing the passer, who's blocking. You try to get a whole mess of different combinations in all of that. So I think that just simply by virtue of what we've seen in terms of performance, and then by virtue of what the situational priorities were, right? Actual kind of game simulation stuff, it feels like Jake Haener is clearly in the lead. Why is this important? Why does this matter? Well, let's face it. Derek Carr was injured a lot in 2023, and not a lot of that was because of Derek Carr. I mean, he had a porous offensive line in front of him, especially in situations where he was having to hold on to the ball, third and longs, things like that. He was sacked a lot on third down. He was sacked on third down more than any other down last year by a mile. And so when you look at sort of what happens on third down, well, if you're in a third and long situation, you're waiting for routes to develop. You're having to hold on to the ball. You're holding on to the ball as a quarterback because you want to give your guy an opportunity with a throw, even though he's not open yet. Maybe he'll get open. Let me hold on and try to extend this play. It all makes sense, right? Third downs, quarterbacks, particularly third and long situations, which is a flaw of the offense for not winning on first and second down, puts quarterbacks in situations to where, they put themselves in bad circumstances from time to time. And if the offensive line can't hold up, then, these guys are going to end up in trouble. So if the New Orleans Saints offensive line does improve in 2024, who the backup quarterback is kind of changes in terms of, not changes, but like who the backup quarterback is and the importance of that conversation changes, right? Because if the offensive line is performing well, which is hard to gauge right now because they're in shorts and shirts and they're playing two-hand touch at this moment, or were playing two-hand touch at that moment. We'll see when they get into joint practices, preseason, padded practices, all these other things. But the importance of this conversation changes based upon how well the offensive line plays, how healthy the offense stays, how efficient the offense is, how well they move the ball, how often or not often they end up in third and long situations, etc. What does Spencer Rattler need to do in order to overtake Jake Haener in this conversation? Well, keep improving. I mean, he showed a lot of improvement from OTAs to minicamp, even though he took a step back when he got into OTAs from where he was at rookie minicamp. Once he starts to get a little bit more comfortable with the guys around him, I think he'll take steps forward. That's already evident in all of this. So for me, it's really just about focusing on continuing the progression and trying to find the consistency. What does Jake Haener have to do to maintain his lead? Just keep working, man. Like, the footwork is fantastic. The throw selection is fantastic. The decision-making has been fantastic outside of the one interception that he did throw during minicamp, where Millard Bradford was able to pick up and pick it off. Not bad. Just keep going, right? And so I think Rattler, you're looking to keep developing. Haener, you're looking to keep finding the consistency in his game and keep finding the efficiency in his game. And I think some of that's true for Rattler too. But these guys aren't massively separated, but I do think that Haener currently has a comfortable lead in this conversation through just OTAs and minicamp. But again, all of that has the opportunity to change during training camp, which is going to be the best and most fun position battle to watch without a doubt. Coming up next, there might be a question around who's going to be QB2, but it feels like there's no question about whether or not wide receiver Cedric Wilson is set to make this roster. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula that's winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to make sure that you're leveling your car up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 parts and accessories, you're always going to be able to find that part that you're looking for at ebaymotors.com. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. You want to check them out right now. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, you can make sure that your car is the MVP and starts bringing home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. All right, family. New Orleans Saints newly signed wide receiver Cedric Wilson already looks like he is a lock, along with the New Orleans Saints' top 3 wide receivers. I might even say top 2 wide receivers. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here for another episode. Even when I drop random episodes like this at random times, people still come through. And it's clear that y'all are loving the show. I'm getting a lot of great feedback. I really appreciate it. I hope that we're doing enough here to make you feel like you've been at minicamps, OTAs, all that good stuff. And I just want to continue to bring you all this good stuff before training camp rolls around. We're not taking a break. We're not going, we're not changing our cadence. It's still 5 days a week, if not more, here over on Locked On Saints. I'm going on a vacation at the end of this month, like in just a couple of weeks, like out of the country. And I'm still going to do shows. You're coming on vacation with me. Hope you enjoy Amsterdam and Norway, because that's where I'm going to be. All right. So, look, I think that when it comes down to where the New Orleans Saints are right now, when they're at their wide receiver, or where it is that they are when it comes to their wide receiver conversation, that they're in a comfortable spot. Do they have like the superstar right now? I don't think so. Do they have the superstar potential? Absolutely. In Chris Olave. I think we're going to be talking about Chris Olave as a star in 2024. While right now, we're still kind of talking about him as like having the potential to be a star. I think that's fair through our first 2 seasons, 4.5 touchdowns in terms of the average, 9 touchdowns over those 2 years, just over 1,000 yards in each of those seasons as well. So like you want to see the production tick up, but I think that like the no longer having Michael Thomas, who was going to be your guy that commanded targets no matter what quote unquote level he was playing at, having that around, like it's tough for Chris Olave to have stepped into a number 1 role at that point because you had Michael Thomas. And regardless of how many games he played or didn't play, in the games that he played, Chris Olave wasn't always the top option. Michael Thomas oftentimes was or was going to be. So this is really Chris Olave's first foray into being the bona fide number 1 guy. So we know that he's a lock. We know that Rashid Shaheed, the speed demon, is absolutely a lock. And I can't wait to see his role grow in Clint Kubiak's offense as well. I feel like A.T. Perry's a lock. He's got some consistency stuff that you'd like to see him clean up. But man, just a contested catch beast all the time, all through OTAs, all through minicamp, many times towards that end of the season where he really finally got his opportunities last year. But then the next guy in that lock conversation really feels like Cedric Wilson. And the reason why is because I think he does something on this New Orleans Saints offense that no other wide receiver does. And that is he is the perfect slot option for this offense. I've mentioned before about how Cedric Wilson compares to me. I don't do a lot of comps, but he compares to me in what Clint Kubiak's offense is expected to be as what Juwan Jennings was for the San Francisco 49ers last year. Big body, slot receiver, big slot potential there, good blocker, guy that you can gadget and move around in a couple of different spots. Like, Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings is the guy that not only caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs last year, but threw a touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl last year. Now, I'm not expecting Cedric Wilson to be out here throwing passes. But unsolicited, Clint Kubiak talked about how much he's impressed with how much Cedric Wilson can be moved about and utilized from a lot of different ways. When I say that it was unsolicited, I really mean that. A reporter asked Clint Kubiak in Thursday's mandatory minicamp OTA or mandatory minicamp media availability, whether or not he has been excited about all the different ways that he can use Taysom Hill. And in the midst of talking about the versatility of Taysom Hill, he went on to also give some shine, give some flowers, give some credit to Cedric Wilson and the way that he can be moved around and how impressed he is with what Cedric Wilson can do. I think that speaks highly of Cedric Wilson. And remember, Cedric Wilson was signed to this team after the New Orleans Saints brought in Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator. That means Cedric Wilson was a guy that this new offensive coaching staff, Keith Williams with the wide receivers, and then, of course, Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, they identified as a guy to go and get. And the Saints went out and got him. And not only did they get him, right, they didn't sign him. He's the only player. Look at all the players that the Saints have signed this offseason. Chase Young, Willie Gay, Shane Lemieux, Justin Herron, Lucas Patrick, all these guys that they've signed. Stanley Morgan Jr., all these guys, Will Harris, every one of them, 1-year deal. The one exception, who is it? It's Cedric Wilson. He got a 2-year deal, much like when the New Orleans Saints gave Kirk Merritt a 2-year deal a few years ago, and Kirk Merritt stuck around on the roster for a little while. Sure, he went down to the practice squad, didn't necessarily have the impact that maybe we thought that he was going to have, but this looks different with Cedric Wilson because he looks like such a perfect fit for Clint Kubiak's system and what he's being asked to do. Now, I'm highlighting Cedric Wilson as a receiver, but his ability as a blocker, don't get it twisted, continues to make him a valuable asset as well. And I'm not trying to put no Traquan Smith on his name, all right? That's not what I'm trying to do here. But you have to be able to block in this offense, especially if you're going to be a big slot presence, all right? We've talked about this before. The typical wide zone offense, and I confirm that this is the way that the New Orleans Saints do this. This is very, very typical for a wide zone offense, is that they dedicate numbers to the gaps, right? And so 8 and 9 are the outside gaps outside the tackles. And so you'll hear designations of like 18, 19. Sometimes you hear stuff like 29, 39 and stuff like that. It just depends. Like the first number is it a straight drop back? Is it a toss? Is it a pitch? Is it all these other things? But typically in the run game, you're talking about a run play that goes to the outside. It's typically 18 or 19. So this is what the Saints are going to be doing a lot of. They're going to run towards the outside of those tackles with guys like Alvin Kamara, should his contract dispute not become a bigger deal, right? Or become an actual problem. I don't feel like it is an actual problem right now, but could it become an actual problem later? Yeah, absolutely. Kendre Miller, potentially a guy like Jordan Mims, who is really, really comfortable in a system like this as well. And others, right? They've got other options, Jacob Caboti and more. James Robinson, who loves this system as well. If you're going to run to outside the tackles, you need to have the tight ends that are going to be able to help you block. But if you can extend your offensive line, we talked about this a bunch. If you can extend your offensive line out to where your slot receiver is able to kind of help you extend all that out on that side of the field, you love that. In this wide zone offense. So I think that's another reason why I look at Cedric Wilson as a lock. So look, it's contract, its role as a receiver, its role as a blocker, its prototype, it's the ability to be able to contribute from a space and a place that no one else is contributing, which is that big slot role. It's just simply unique. And I think Equanimeous St. Brown has levels of this too. But I think Cedric Wilson, you have to look at the contract, look at the role, how he fits, the prototype, all these other things. It just makes so much sense. I'm willing to call Cedric Wilson a pretty surefire lock, at least going into camp. We'll see how things change over the course of training camp. But for right now, all systems go when it comes to Cedric Wilson. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. After this, don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today's 24/7 stream. All the news that you need around the world of sports, biggest breaking news, covered by the local folks that know it the best. Head over to the Locked On Sports Today YouTube page, or you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up next, we're taking a look at the New Orleans Saints defensive line. How many will they keep on the interior? How many will they keep on the edge? And who will they keep? We're going to be breaking all of it down as we look at what's going to separate and kind of solidify this New Orleans Saints defensive line in 2024. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints defensive line is going to be another very intriguing battle, position group, unit, however it is that you want to look at it, over the course of training camp. But it feels like we can already kind of project who could potentially make the roster, or at least who's got the best chances. Let's break it down. We'll look at the players that are absolute locks. We'll look at the players that have really good chances, and we'll look at those that are actively competing, even though sometimes forgotten about in the conversation. We appreciate you very much for being here with us. Don't forget, we are your team every day. So I'll be back with you on Monday. We're going to take a look, unless I do what I did today and do more shows over the weekend. I don't know. Maybe I will. We'll take a look at why Pete Werner must impress in 2024 and other make it or break it year players. And we're also going to take a look at players that have moved the needle in the right direction over the course of OTAs and minicamps. So you want to come back and check that out on Monday. And if I come up with other stuff, I'll do the Saturday or Sunday show, because why not? And of course, insiders will do an exclusive Q&A, as well as we like to call them Crew&A. So if you want to be a part of that, join subtext.com/LockedOnSaints or click the link in the description. And of course, you can text WHODAT to 504-285-7473. So here are my locks for the New Orleans Saints at edge rusher, which might be the easiest place to find multiple locks, right? Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, Chase Young. Those are your locks for sure. I get really close to throwing Isaiah Foskey in the locks situation as well, because it's only his second year. Giving up on him after his first year, not typically what the New Orleans Saints will do. Feels very reactionary, all that. Looks really good out there. Looks fit, moves really well, all of that. Just want to see him stay healthy, see him stay on the field, see him have an impact, all of those things. Nothing wrong with that. So, look, Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, Chase Young, like those are your absolute locks. And it sounds like Chase Young's trending in the right direction. Not just to be ready for the regular season. No. It sounds like he's going to be ready for at least some point in training camp. Now, don't forget, he's going to be coming off this surgical procedure. They're going to do a checkup on him in about 6 weeks, which is going to be right at the beginning of training camp, I assume. And then based on that, whenever he gets started, I would expect like a week or two long sort of acclimation period or ramp up before he's really full go over the course of training camp. So don't be surprised to see guys like Peyton Turner, guys like Isaiah Foskey, and some of the other folks that are competing, maybe still getting some snaps ahead of Chase Young for the first couple of weeks, even after Chase Young makes his cleared return. And speaking of Peyton Turner, this is another guy that's absolutely fighting for a spot. We're going to dig into Peyton Turner a little bit more on Monday's episode, because he's definitely falls under the make it or break it category. It's a contract year. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. There's a really, really populated tight end, defensive end room, all those things. I think we have to talk about Peyton Turner in that context. But a lot of what you're wanting to see from Peyton Turner, it's not, does he have the talent? Every time he's on the field, he has some kind of impact. He's destroying the Carolina Panthers in his first ever game. He's blocking field goals to help win games against Atlanta in a huge comeback in the fourth quarter, all this other stuff. Like, he's always seemed to have an impact anytime that he's out there, and played well anytime that he's out there. The big thing is going to be, can he stay healthy? A maximum of 170 defensive snaps over the course of his first 3 seasons. Again, we'll dig into the Peyton Turner conversation a little bit more, but absolutely, to be fair to him, all he's got to do is prove that he can stay healthy and stay on the field. That's really it, and that will definitely help him get the roster. Now, if it's Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, Chase Young, Isaiah Foskey, Peyton Turner, there's your 5 edge rushers. That's probably where you close the door in terms of who makes your active roster. But there are other guys that are competing. Trayshawn Jeffcoat, the undrafted free agent, came out of Arkansas, formerly of Missouri. Nathan Latu, another undrafted free agent that joined this offseason, who's got a lot of those kind of speed rusher, 250-pound guy, run stopper ability, all this other stuff. We haven't seen him really pop off as a UDFA yet, but training camp will provide him that opportunity. And another guy that constantly gets left out of the edge rusher conversation is Nico Lalos, who had a fantastic preseason last year. Remember that? Multiple sack games, all that stuff. He was all over in terms of getting into the backfield, being disruptive, getting after quarterbacks, and finishing plays in the backfield as well. Not a lot of almost sacks for Nico Lalos. When he was there, he made the play. And I think there's value in that. And so if he can replicate that again, I think that means something. So even if you're looking at practice squad opportunity, all three of these guys absolutely have something to compete for and even could potentially upset somebody that moves in. I don't want to leave Tanoh Kpassagnon completely out of this conversation. I do want to acknowledge that he's also a part of the equation for the team, very likely to start the season on injured reserve. Remember, teams now can place 2 players on injured reserve on cut day instead of having to do what they used to have to do, which was carry players on the 53-man roster and then move them to injured reserve, thereby risking players to waivers and stuff like that. That was unnecessary, right? Because if you could just put them on injured reserve right off the bat, instead of having to carry them on the roster, you wouldn't have to make room on your roster first. So that's going to be very helpful. I imagine Tanoh Kpassagnon will be one of those guys. So I think that's the way that we're looking at things when it comes to the edge. Now let's look at the interior, which actually I mentioned that the edge is probably easier to find your locks. I think this one's pretty easy too. Your locks are Bryan Bresee, last year's first-round pick, a duh. Khalen Saunders, probably your best defensive tackle last year, all around, right? Bryan Bresee was really disruptive as a pass rusher, all those other things, but Khalen Saunders ate up double teams, was big in the run game, helped you on offense, right? Was blocking the way in those what we like to call the gumbo formations, all that kind of stuff. And then Nathan Shepard, who also was very disruptive, maybe arguably was your best pure defensive tackle. So I think those three are locks for you, without a doubt. And I think Khalen Saunders takes another step here in 2024, big time, as he is now comfortable with the system and now gets to add all the things that he would typically add that complement his athleticism a little bbit more, sort of like what we saw over in Kansas City. And then, of course, in school before that, Western Illinois, if I remember correctly. I think the next best odds to make the roster as the 4th defensive tackle, which might be all that the Saints would keep on the roster here, would be Christian Boyd. Christian Boyd, who was drafted in the 6th round this year, has been awesome in minicamp, OTAs, consistently good in the run game, consistently good at understanding where to be, penetrating, getting into the backfield, all that stuff. And really, now that I think about it, the Saints could keep a 10th defensive lineman. So that's maybe where a guy like Nico Lalos could potentially come in. But there's also some interior guys. Jack Heflin, who spent all year last year on the practice squad, had been elevated for a few games as well, got some real playing time as a rotational guy. Then there's also Kyler Baugh, who was brought in as a UDFA, who's had some nice moments too. One of those guys could effectively make the roster. The Tanoh Kpassagnon ability to play inside and outside role, which made him which made it possible for them to keep 10 defensive linemen, because I wouldn't call Tanoh the 10th defensive lineman. He got the 3rd most snaps out of any edge rusher for the team last year. But having a guy like him, or not having a guy like him start off the season, could potentially open up that 10th spot for a defensive tackle that can play in, defensive end that can play tackle, and of course, guys that can contribute on special teams. We've seen guys like Peyton Turner, as well as Trajan Jeffcoat, as well as Isaiah Foskey, as well as Nico Lalos, all participate, and maybe more, in kickoffs now, because you want kind of this slew of wide receivers and safeties and corners and linebackers that are up there, but then you kind of want the big guys out there as well that can help you out. So we've seen a lot of those guys get some opportunities there. So that could be another way that somebody steals maybe that 10th spot on the defensive line, whether it's 6 edge rushers and 4 defensive tackles, and one of them's got some flexibility like Peyton Turner, like Chase Young both have, like Cam Jordan has, or 5 and 5 even, and you still get some flex in some of these guys. So great ways to go, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see how all of this pans out. So let me know, who do you think, let's say 10 defensive linemen. They could be any configuration, any number of tackles, any number of edge rushers. Let's say 10 defensive linemen. What are the 10 that you're keeping that are currently on the New Orleans Saints roster? Let me know. I'm very, very curious. All right, y'all. Appreciate you for being here for another kind of bonus episode, I guess we'll call it. I needed to do another 2 a day. I'm having too much fun. And there's a ton to break down. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know. And of course, we will see you again here very soon as we take a look at make it or break it players, including Pete Werner, Peyton Turner, and others. And of course, players that move the needle in the right direction during OTAs and minicamp. We're going to break all of that down on our next episode. and of course, keep you up to date with everything going on around your New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Everything you need to know from around the world of sports in 20-25 minutes. Locked On Pelicans, and of course, Locked On LSU, all there for you as well. You're on Locked On Louisiana. We appreciate you very much, making Locked On Saints part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you. Like I'm passing a car on the freeway.